nights, it was the ladies and nights. It was the ladies' door locked it down.
Creaking door.
But the, what was it again?
There's something that's a degree of a place. 80% of it, because your role with the key workers for Agenda for Change, with job evaluations.
You appreciate it.
Because, you know, there's only 8 people that actually who've done the actual government training. It won't be the problems, because I'm sure you're around with the grading system.
Yes.
I was going to
Can you make that face? This is not funny now. Get it off. So, right hand window. Done. Right hand window, it's gone. There was a white thing at that window and it went, it moved.
But how do you know it was a she? I couldn't tell you whether it was she or a he. But Phil, all I'm telling you now is it was definitely somebody in that window. Philip, have we experienced a phenomenon?
We had our first.
It's not there now, is it? No?
And that's not fair, because all you're doing is getting the same amount of period.
I was going to say the camera management scheme, don't they?
Well, come on a ghost hunt and they're talking shop.
David's getting on your camera now.
Stop it. It's not funny now.
I shouldn't have coordinated the last person at the time. Oh yes, yeah.
And he's sitting there because nice something. It's really good. You think he's on that anyway?
Yeah.
We just have to decide these institutions to provide that service because they think there is more than what they do.
Part of the Jacobean building that was built in the 1600s. This room and the one next door, although built by the Ferrers in that time, have been displayed in the time of the Victorians. These are very sort of high status rooms, principal rooms in the house. The room next door being used as a day room. This room was the withdrawing room, where the ladies would withdraw after their evening meal and they would sit and entertain themselves while the gentlemen were next door. This room caused quite a lot of excitement on the most haunted visits because they set up sensors in here and positioned them to see those things called orbs, the lights that go backwards and forwards or across when you're watching some television. They found there was a lot of activity around that fire and blue lights were seen flashing backwards and forwards across the fireplace. And if you've watched the programme, you'll know that orbs indicate paranormal activity. And that follows through into an experience that one of the staff have here. As you know, there are quite a few museum staff, and it's their job to open the building and close the building down at night. One of them, Sue Fudge, who no longer is in the castle, had an experience in this room. It was her job to come round in the evening and close up. And she was coming into this room through the breakfast parlour to close the windows, the curtains at the windows over here. Of course, the room's always quite dull, especially when it's getting towards evening. And she felt uneasy as she walked in the room, and also felt that it was rather cold in here. So she pulled the curtain across, and something made her turn round. She turned round, and sitting on this green settee was the figure of a woman, dressed in Victorian clothes, a very dark black colour, probably mourning clothes. The figure was watching her. She caught her eye, and the figure smiled. Now, Sue was very alarmed by this. She didn't know where this person had come from, obviously. She turned to call to another member of staff to another part of the building in case she was an intruder. But when she looked again, the figure had gone. Sue had no idea, neither did the people that were spoken to afterwards, know why anybody should be in this room, why they should be sitting on that settee. Especially as when the castle was handed over to the corporation, there were no artefacts within the castle. The family that owned it took everything out, so there were no specific bits and pieces in the castle that belonged to the castle prior to them taking it over. Instead, these rooms have been kitted out with a few acquired possessions that they've been able to buy in, but most of the furniture that you see in these rooms are on loan from the Victoria and Albert Museum, with perhaps the exception of the green settee. This was actually a local piece that was purchased from the Peel family and was originally in Drayton Manor. Of course, as people know, if you know the history of the town, the Peel family who lived there were very influential in politics and were a very well-established family. They would have had a lot of visitors there, and the family of several generations of Peels that lived at Drayton Manor. So, who was it on the settee? Could it have been one of the Peel widows? Could it have been one of their visitors? It's understood that Queen Victoria did attend Drayton Manor at least twice, and may have been used in the day for sewing or something like that. But the evening it had a life of its own, because the gentlemen after dinner would retire to the breakfast parlour with their brandy, their port and their cigars. And so there have been many reports by staff in the castle of things that have been heard from this room into the rooms below. People working downstairs in the shop or in the storeroom have heard the sound of people walking across the floor. They've smelt tobacco smoke in and around this room. They've also heard people in conversation, usually male voices. And so that's given them an expectation of many ghosts. Of course, this room, as I said, is one of the Jacobean rooms, and so it was developed through the Ferriers and the Shirley families who lived here.
I'm all alone here. But that's the way it has always been for me. Fate chose to take what little happiness I could make for myself, and now I am doomed to walk these rooms in solitude. I have heard folk call me the Weeping Woman, but they know nothing of my story, as I doubt do you. I am Lady Elizabeth Shirley. My mother was Anne Ferrers, last of her name to own this castle. Her death was my beginning, for she died giving birth to me. And I think it was from that moment onwards that I was cursed. My beloved brothers, they all died before me, and I became the reluctant heiress, marrying James Compton, Earl of Northampton. Oh, he was a good man. And I was now a countess. But titles and wealth, they do not protect you from tragedy. I had 6 beautiful children, and one by one I watched them die. First there was my George, little more than a baby. A lovely little boy, so full of life when he was taken from me. And then there was my James, my handsome James, 16 years old and just blossoming into manhood. And he was shortly followed by his sisters, Jane and Anne, and I honestly thought God was going to take all my children from me. But he spared me one, my Charlotte. But I could not love that child as she deserved, because I was so afraid she was going to die too. As you can imagine, the grief of all these deaths has weighed so heavily upon my heart and my mind that I started to lose my wits. My darling James, he did everything he could to comfort me. But when God took him too, that's when I lost the will to live. and soon after I joined him in the grave. But even in death I have found no peace, and I am still doomed to walk these rooms. I can only hope that one day I will be reunited with all those whom I have lost. But until then, all I can do is just search for them.
Moaning Myrtle? Oh, she gone? Oh, thank goodness for that. You know, all the time, moan, moan, moan. They should call her Moaning Myrtle, not the weeping woman. Oh well. She thinks she's all alone here, but she's not. She's got me. I mean, I don't let her see me or anything because I don't want to upset her. Oh well, I can't stand gossip all the time. Better go. Bye.
Right. Elizabeth, as you saw there, was the daughter of Anne Ferris, as she said, which meant that the family name changed, and the Ferris family no longer owned this building. Anne married, and Elizabeth was her only surviving daughter. There were no male heirs. If we go out of the room, the door at the back, we come up the stairs now. The reason being that she found whenever the staff here have to clean everything, you know, it's part of their job as the assistants to keep everything in good order and to dust around and that sort of thing. And when she was asked to work in here, she found that this area was extremely melancholy. She'd get very distressed in here. She'd report that she could hear a child crying. At the moment, we're standing in what was part of the Jacobean wing, and you can see the Jacobean on this floor are dedicated to the Cook family, who were the last tenants of the castle. So if you come in the daytime, there's quite a few rooms through there that you can see, which shows you what life was like in various parts of a Victorian household. But when we were renovating this room, they decided they would try and restore it to how it would have been when it was built, and that's why the Jacobean windows are displayed in there, and why you can see the panelling around here. The family that lived here, the Cooks, were a very wealthy family, as we said. Thomas Cook was a widower. His wife had died and he'd got teenage children when he moved here. His oldest daughter, Annie, was in fact his housekeeper. She acted as housekeeper for him. She wasn't very happy when he decided that he wanted to get married again, especially as the woman he wanted to marry was the same age as she was. So she felt her nose was going to put out of joint a little bit. It caused a lot of unhappiness in the family, and in fact she was threatened with the lunatic asylum and being thrown out of the house and all sorts of things. But at any rate, he did marry and he did have children. Unfortunately, only one of his children survived of that family. The older siblings were alive, but only one of his second marriage survived. And her name was Ethelfleda. So it was obviously traditional to try and take some of the Saxon names with them. So that's the Victorian era. What we're going to be doing on this walk is going back through time. We started really with the Victorians, and we'll be moving back through the ages really as we walk around. I'm trying to think. My story. My story for up here is about something that happened very recently. In October, we had a castle by candlelight, which is a similar tour to this one, where you see episodes that sort of have a thread running through them to tell you a complete story. The theme of that one was the Witch Finder General, and then looking for witches in the castle at the time, as it was near to Halloween. However, in this room we had two reenactors, a member of staff and a gentleman who comes in and does special displays for us. They were performing in this room, but not on the bed. And get that straight now. Right, Kevin and Carol were the name of the two people that were here. And of course, when we do these performances, people do have to stay in the rooms for quite a long time across the evening, because as soon as you put candles up or the lights are on and people are coming in, people have to stay where they are. Apart from they are allowed to go to the toilet occasionally for the evening. On this one particular occasion, Carol and Kevin were in here, and Kevin decided that he needed to go downstairs. So he left Carol on his own in here. Now, Carol works in here in the daytime. She's not unnerved by, and in fact, she's very open to experiences. So she was quite happy to stay up here on her own. He went out of that little door, where you'll be going later on, downstairs, came back up. As he was coming across the parapet, he could see through the window that you can see in that bathroom a figure of a gentleman talking to Carol. Or so he thought. You could see the back of this gentleman. You could see he got short hair. He was quite tall. He got sort of shortish sideburns, and just assumed it was a visitor. So he came in through the door and was surprised to see Carol on her own. So he said, "Oh, who was that one? You know, that was in here on my way around?" He said, "They've gone pretty quick." And Carol said, "Well, there's been no one here. I've been on my own the entire time." Now, if you met Kevin, he's an actor. In other words, he does sword fights, he does horse riding, he does all sorts of things. He's a big bloke, a very burly big bloke. He's not, you wouldn't think, be bothered by anything, but he wouldn't come in this room again on his own. Now, they did have other experiences while they were up here. Changing the temperature, feeling very chilled, sometimes a wind that seemed to go in and around. Carol felt that the figure that, whatever spirit was in here, liked her and was perhaps a bit alien to him. So perhaps that's why Kevin decided he wasn't going to spend any time in here on his own. At any rate, we're now going to go through that door and onto the parapet. Servants' quarters in the main part of the building, and of course that part, the top part, the third story, was demolished, and of course then they had to find somewhere else for the servants, and we believe, and in fact it's proved, that it was this area here. If you can see that there are several displays that come out from the wall. That's because there are little fireplaces behind there, and that indicates that this area was actually 4 rooms. Now, there would have been servants' quarters, and they would have been sleeping in here 4, 5, 6, perhaps to a room, because the servants didn't have accommodation for each one of them. They had to share, and it would depend whether you got on with the person who was sleeping in the same room with you, I think, how you got on. And of course, one station of people would be in one room, the Tweenies in one room, the downstairs maids in another one. Different servants in different rooms. You'd probably have had women servants up here, because your men servants would have been somewhere else. We didn't put them close together in case there was any hanky-panky. Right, there was plenty of hanky-panky there in here. A member of our staff came again. Very often staff are here in 2s, and so one lady was coming into this area. Her name is June Hall. She's still employed by us. And the other lady was going out to open up where you'd just come from. As she moved across to this bicycle behind you, she felt somebody blowing something into her eyes. It was gritty and it was unpleasant, and it felt very much like sand. So she was very alarmed by this. It was a very violent sort of surge of stuff going into her eyes. So she called to a friend. A friend hurried back across the parapet and came towards her. So they were here together. What they saw was a vision, blue smoke, a curled up, spiralling, floating piece of blue smoke that left the area where they were, which was there, and moved first of all over to this Gibbs and Canning display, and then moved and disappeared as it approached that window. Now they had no idea where it had come from, and it wasn't there as they entered the room. It was something that manifested itself and moved around. Whatever it was, it didn't feel pleasant, and they weren't happy to be here. So they very quickly scurried out what we're going to do. If you look at the walls over there, you can see how deep they've had to cut into the outer wall to put in those windows. When this was originally used as a room, there would have been windows on that side, which is the courtyard. When the Pharaohs were remodelling the castle, that's when they changed it and put those windows in and took sections of the outer wall out. This room has had a very checkered history. It's now called the dining room, and would have been used as a dining room in Victorian times, with the room next door being used as a billiard room. Of course, after the Pharaohs family were here, we've heard a little bit about the Shirleys, and then we move on to the parliamentary and the English Civil War. Of course, the English Civil War was in 1643.
Attacking our troops at this fortress for over a year. 23rd of June 1643, we attacked this castle. It took only 2 days to enter this royalist den. We thought all had fled, all too afraid to fight. We knew that without a full garrison we were doomed. Coming from Lichfield, but we were loyal to our king, so we'd stay to the end. I didn't think we'd fight back. It was in the courtyard below, and we began this bloody battle. It was an honourable but faithful fight. I only had one thought. Stones of the courtyard below, bound together by our hatred.
Right, as you can see, Tamworth and Lichfield were both royalist strongholds at the start of the Civil War. Lichfield then became a parliamentary camp, and this was still royalist, so that's why there were skirmishes. Then eventually we were overtaken as well and became parliamentarian, and then it all changed and Lichfield became royalist. So, there was quite a bit of coming and going, quite a bit of fighting, I would have thought, going on in and around the place as well. Right, we're now going up what is known as the Haunted Staircase. Now, if any of you have heard of the history of the castle, you know that there have been several sightings. First one of note was in 1949, when a team of people came and held a vigil here, and stayed all night in this area down here, and photographed, caught an image on film, shall I say. I don't think it was a photograph, I think it was film that they did it with in 1949. And after that occurred, there was another team came, which I remember when I moved into Tamworth. There was another vigil sent here shortly before they opened up some of the areas to the public, when again they had instances of strange happenings on this staircase. The latest thing, there's one now. The latest thing was a few years ago, about 4 years ago, I think John Yates, if I've got the name right. Notes, yes, John Yates. He came, took a photograph here. When the image was developed, it was distorted. It was sort of something had happened to it in the process of it being filmed. While Most Haunted were here, they set up a camera in that area, and it moved, and nobody knew why. So you'll definitely feel the chill as you walk up the stairs. It is a place where people do have shivers down the back and whatever, so feel free to feel.
You can.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, go.
The oldest part of the castle that you're standing in now, part of the tower. Above us we've got the guard room. Below us we have the dungeon.
Oh, the pain!
Fairies!
Caused me so much pain when she stabbed me in the side with her crucier. I awoke to see her. Surely sent by the devil himself. The woman they call Saint Editha. You see, I had wanted the land at Polesworth for some time, but the nunnery had stood in my way, so I evicted the nuns. Many had done similar things before me, so I thought little of it at the time. But then the foundress of that damn place, Saint Editha, rose from the grave to give me a deadly warning. Return the land or die. It has been 2 days now, and still the wound has not healed. If there is no improvement by tomorrow, then I must consider returning the land to those wretched nuns.
The room you're in is called the Haunted Bedchamber and recounts the story of the Black Lady, who was in fact a nun at Polesworth Abbey. The story you've just seen reenacted was Robert de Marmion, who, there were several de Marmions lived here, and most of them called Robert, because they seem to name every son after the same person. And of course the story is that he took away the lands from the nuns and was visited by a nun while sleeping, and promptly gave the land back to them. Thought better of his actions.
What did the nun do?
Right, we're going. The room next door, as I said, is known as the Haunted Bedroom and did cause a lot of excitement on the night of Most Haunted. I don't know if you're the group that was talking to me earlier, but some of you may already know this story. I'm going to read it because I wasn't here on the night, but I will add bits into it. This is Christina's story, and Christina is a reenactor, unfortunately, who's not able to be with us as she's just had an operation in hospital. This room, the room next door, was one of a lot of extreme paranormal activity, and the events that her story is concerned with occurred in the early hours of the morning. They'd been on what they'd done during the daytime, they'd done major tours, looked at the various sites around the building, and the Most Haunted team decided that they wanted to set things up in that room and have a vigil next door inside that room. Christina, who's very quiet, very mild lady, was being their guide because they had to be escorted at all times around the building for various reasons, because strangers don't know where there are sensors or where there are alarms or whatever, because there are alarms in the building as well. And that was the last room that the vigils were going to take place in. It's all right. Christina was responsible for them, but when she got to the haunted room, Christine was asked to stay outside, while Yvette Fielding and 3 others stayed in the room. So Christina was asked to sit on the staircase in between where you just come across. As she sat there, she was obviously listening to what was going on in the next room, and she could hear them saying that they wanted a sign. They wanted the spirits to show themselves, let them know that they were here. And they were talking and communicating with one another for about 10 minutes altogether, and Christine was sitting on the stairs outside. Sometime during that time, Christina heard very loud footsteps. She was sitting next to the door, and she thought that they'd left her sitting down there and gone out through the other door. So she wasn't very happy about that. But just as she was sort of thinking they'd gone, the door opened, and Yvette opened the door and looked out and asked her if she'd been rattling the adjoining door. She'd been rattling the door handle. Now, Christina is a very mild and meek lady, but she thought, what a cheek! I'm here in my own time, in the middle of the night, could be at home with my family, stuck up a staircase on my own while you're all in there playing about. And now they're accusing me of trying to falsify their information. So Christina very politely said, no, she had not, and that the door, and at that point Yvette closed the door on her again. So Christina was again left on the stairwell all on her own. Now she was very tired. She'd much rather been at home with her family, and she didn't want to stay on the stairs any longer. So really, because she was feeling a little bit miffed about what was going on, she jokingly asked the spirit of the Black Lady if she'd give them all a shock, just so she could go home and be with her family. Well, somewhere, someone must have been listening. This is when the fire alarms sounded. All through the building. It caused a high degree of consternation, panic from the presenters, who Christina escorted from the building because it's part of her job to do a fire exit in it as well. The fire brigade came. They inspected all round the building but found nothing that could have set off the alarms. There was no explanation for this activity at all, so we wonder, was it a spirit that they conjured up while they were in the room, or was it the answer to Christina's prayer that she could go home, which I'd like to think it was. So that's the story from next door. We now reach here, which is the chapel, except it isn't a chapel, and never was a chapel. It's nice to have a display of one because most houses, great homes, would have had one, but it's more likely that if this was a fortress, the chapel would have been outside or against one of the outer walls, because you couldn't imagine that the soldiers would all come up here in full regalia, have a quick prayer and go down again to fight a battle. They're more likely to do it downstairs in the courtyard. So over the past 12 months they've been looking into the that's what it is, yes, of this particular building. We're now standing in what is called the Warder's Lodge. You'll recognise it as soon as you go out when we go down. This is the top part of the Warder's Lodge. This building was a very high status building. Now, when we went in and looked at the bedroom, where I told you Kevin and Carol's story, that room would have been used by Lord John Ferrers when it was first built as his rooms. This would have been used as Lady Ferrers' rooms. It may have been that Lady Ferrers was the mother of the Lord. In other words, it was the Dowager House, because it's completely self-contained and has provision for servants. One of the servants would have been here. This would have been originally a solid wall along there. That would have been built with a solid wall, and that would have been a room. Now, I said earlier that servants always slept in little groups. In the case of a high status servant, that wouldn't be true. He would have a small room to himself. So it would be a bit like the steward of the castle, the Lord's right-hand man. He would be in a room such as this. He would be responsible, perhaps going down to the gates if they had dignitaries arriving or whatever. It could have been in the time of the Victorians, a butler's room, because the butler was always given the high status, so it could have been his room. We don't know. But this room, again, caused some consternation, not with Most Haunted, but with one of the mediums that has been round on one of our ghost trips. She finds this room very unhappy, made her very nervous in here. She was quite concerned, and when she was doing whatever mediums do, she could sense the presence of a male, a younger male in this room, somebody who had been very unhappy and who in fact had killed himself in here by hanging himself, possibly from a beam. Well, the beams are in the middle. But he must be very short. Very short. That's everything for that one. We're going to go down now into one of the rooms that are not normally open to the public. It's only recently been reopened. It's called the Ferris Room, and I'm going to lay my torch today because before I left it up. I think this is a power cut. They give me this because I didn't use it yesterday. Well, we're going back out that room, but we're going down this there. Not going down again. There you go. Look, with coats of arms above it. So it's been a very nice room. It's panelled all the way round. Right. And of course has a lovely Stuart window at the far side. If I shine this anywhere, just tell me. Right. This is a room that up until recently was used as an office. And it's directly above the reception area where you came in. The staff that are in the reception area have very often reported the sounds of noises in this room. As you know, as walking around the castle, that some of the rooms are quite squeaky. But they've heard things in here, not just floorboards moving, but the sounds of movement in this room. Now, this in the records that they've been looking up, they found that at a time it was a day room for a lady. It has also been used as a nursery. Of course, as people who study any history of pre-Victorian times will know that there was a high incident of death occurred for childbirth, both of the mothers of the children and of the children themselves. Very few children survived, and those that lived in infancy, a lot of them didn't live as long as their parents. Right, somebody else up there.
That'll continue.
So, this room itself, there is a story associated with this room which brings us up to the present day. As you know, as you were told when you first arrived, the custodians originally lived in the castle. Then with the advent of things like the alarms, it was possible to alarm the building and people to go home at night. So the only thing is that the people who, like the museum's assistants, do have to be on call, so that if anything triggers the alarms, they have to be called, they have to come out. So it so happened, now I can't see the name of the lady, but I think her name was Anne. Anne was on duty, it was on call out, and their alarm went off in the castle. So the police come out first, and Anne comes out, lets them in. The police go round the building with her, so she's not in here on her own. And it was in the early morning that she came out. The police went all through the building, there was nobody here. They checked everywhere and gave it the all clear. But of course the problem when you have an alarm go off is that you have to call somebody out to reset it. So Anne then had to stay here on her own. She stayed in the room below us, the reception area. She didn't feel very easy that particular night. It was a bit windy outside, and it had been a bit unnerving that somebody had been in the building, and she just felt generally ill at ease. She also became a bit alarmed when she heard things being dragged across the floor above her head. So she could hear these noises, and it wasn't just a gentle dragging, it was as though somebody was throwing things or pushing things out of the way. Now, as I say, this was to be used as an office, and at the time we're talking about, they had just had a delivery of furniture to set up the office in this room. So that was what could have been being moved about above her head. She was very alarmed at what was happening, but knew that somebody was coming, so she stepped out of the reception area into the porch. So she was standing by the gate when you came in. While she was there, she heard the telephone ring. So she stepped inside, lifted the receiver, spoke. It was the engineer. He was on his way when she opened the door. So put down the phone, went round, opened the door. The engineer was standing outside, and he said, "By God," he says, "what you got in there, a lift?" He said, "You got here pretty smartish." I said, well, I was only standing outside the door. He said, you were. He said, I've just seen you. He said, as I was coming up the mound towards this room, there was a figure at the window. He said, I waved at you. He took no notice of me. And he said, that's when I decided that I'd use my mobile to phone ahead and ask you to let me in. Well, of course, Anne and the engineer who was doing the lights didn't spend any time, more than they had to, in resetting everything, getting out of the building, because she hadn't been in the room, and there was no way that she could have got down the stairs as quickly as she had to open the door to him if she'd been here. So we're now going down the stairs. We're tracing the stairs before you all fall asleep. Right, go. There, which was the Tudor bit, and then we moved again into the tower, which is up there. This room, of course, the last building you've been is the Warder's Lodge. Right, so that's where you've just been. I'd like you to imagine now that we've gone back in time yet again to how it was when it was first built as a stone building. And what you can see here is the tall tower, which would have been the original part of the building over there, and then all the way around here, the curtain walls.
Times were hard in the year around 1250. Stealing food was the only way we could survive the long, hard, cold winter. We didn't want to steal food, but got no choice. I mean, we were desperate. Those up here, they cared a little about our plight. Anyway, got caught, didn't I? Poaching fish out of the river. Dragged up here to be sentenced for my crime. That black-hearted fiend Lord Marmion, he's the one who decided my fate. He ordered that my right hand be severed from my body. We knew that way I wouldn't be able to do any work and earn any money to get food for my family. Then we'd all perish. Anyway, as you can see, never carried out this punishment, did he? But he did put me up there in the cold, dark, damp cell, deep within the thick walls of this here castle. Aye, well, these walls may be thick, but I hear voices. And these here voices were telling me fortune was changing for Lord Marmion. You see, he sided with the barons against King John. So as punishment for his disloyalty, King John sent out the order for this castle to be destroyed. He was lenient, though. He decreed that all inhabitants should vacate this castle, so no living soul come to any harm during its destruction. I thought this was great. Chance more freedom here. And the last people were leaving the castle, they'd forgotten all about me up here in myself. The castle fell silent, till the next morning when the king's men started knocking the top of the walls down. I cried out to them, but nobody seemed to hear me. I still thought I might survive, though. But as I got 3 parts away down, the old structure of the walls started to crumble. Choking dust and rocks come crashing down on top of me. That's the last I remember. Now all I do is walk the passageways within the walls of this castle, hoping someday somebody will find me old broken bones and give me a decent burial.
We'll leave him and move, I think, into the dungeon, which is over this way. I'll let you out again. This, as I told you, is part of the tower, the bottom part of the tower, and has been used for many things apart from the dungeon as a storage space, and perhaps even an air raid shelter in the Second World War. I'm going to tell you one story before we leave, and it's better to do it here because it's quite light. We've sort of travelled all the way round through time and come back now to almost the present day. There is a story about the 50s when we had, in fact, the janitor, caretaker, whatever you want to call him, curator, living on site. And he would have been living in the accommodation near to where you came in. And in fact, the shop where you may want to go before you leave was where he had his bedroom. He stayed there, and his son and their pet dog used to sleep in the room, because obviously a dog was a good alarm if anybody was messing about outside the castle. Could perhaps do with one now, because there's very often kids messing about outside the castle. One night they went to sleep and were both woken up by the feeling of very cold, icy fingers running up and down their legs. Was that wishful thinking on their part? It alarmed them both. They turned the light on, and the dog was barking loudly in the corner. And they looked all around. They even went out of the room. There was nothing to be seen outside. There was nobody inside the room. And they decided they ought to settle back down to sleep again. So they turned off the light, got back into bed, but the dog wouldn't shut up. The dog went on and on. And in fact, he stopped barking but began to whimper and cry. And if you've ever been with a pet that's been whimpering away, not your husband, somebody whimpering away in the corner, you know exactly what it's like and how annoying it can be. So they opened the door for the dog to have a run. Unfortunately, the dog didn't stop running and has never been back since. That's the end of your tour for today, I'm afraid. So if you'd like to make your way back, you may want to go into the shop. There is a guide in there if you want to know any more about the castle. And if not, you're very welcome to go back on the daytime. You know,
What am I like? David said about the screws in the wall. David, the screws in the wall. Phillips screwdriver.
I found that dog. I know who it is.
Phil, go on, sit by him.
It's his dad.